I'm a person who values time a lot. I would never be okay with having a partner who disregards the concept of time, who's like, okay, we'll do it whenever. And the intention was marriage was not just marriage of putting two people together, but also to see how the community itself can grow. You will see the negative side of the person as well, where you'll realize that whatever they do or say is not always good. Whatever they are is not the best for you. And you might not be okay with it. The second love, which is obviously made to last a lot longer than the first love. Yeah.
Hey Sagar, I think we are talking about marriages today. Out of all the topics we could have picked, we decided to go with something spicy. I have some questions loaded in. But before we get started, what is your general view on this topic of marriages? And
before we talk about the spice at all, I want to remind you that I'm talking to a 21-year-old. And so this message is for all the 21-year-olds and all the people who are not married, that this, whatever podcast, little video, is not to deter you from getting married. Understand that I'm married. I have been married for 11 years now. We're about to turn 12 this December. I'm not saying that marriage is bad, but well, I do have my own perspectives to it, and maybe that's what we want to talk about today. Yes, Madesh, not for you first question.
Yeah, the first question, I really wanted to dive into the fact that, wherever I turn, in my own life, wherever I turn, it's like people having a lot of marital problems. And the way these marital problems is kind of show up, it's like on one side, there's this spouse who's kind of working too hard. On the other side, there is, the counter spouse, the other person who's just not understanding why the other person's working so hard or what is making them prioritize prioritize their work over the spouse. And in between these two spouses is like the child, often caught in their own world, who's not understanding anyone, who's just in their own world of fantasy and is growing up watching these problems unfold. What do you have to say about, all of this and how the marriages are right now? And I think we'll take it from there. I'm very curious personally.
Right. So first of all, you use the word prioritize a couple of times. So I'm just going to dump right into there because you know that I believe a lot in the word priorities. And I think that's where everything starts from. Understand that marriage loses its priority over a bit. And that's very natural to happen. Any relationship for that matter will start losing its priority over a period of time. More, Madesh, there's some background and suppression on Kannada, please. No, just go to audio settings. So what I was saying, Madesh, is that over a period of time, every marriage, the problem becomes that the marriage itself doesn't become a priority. It takes a back seat. For whatever reason it may be, right? And I'm not saying that it's always, and people usually use a simple thing that, hey, you know what, people are getting bored of each other. I don't think that's the case at all. The problem is always that the expectations are always too high. Even before they got married, there was this high set of expectations from what has to be there from a spouse. First of all, because of their own conditioning and because of what they would have seen around them in their life. And also a lot of times from their own perception of the world through movies. And this is one of the biggest reasons that what happens is that they start off on a very high set of expectation that, okay, if this is a spouse, this is how I expect him or her to behave in the marriage. And then as they go ahead, they realize the reality is not such. Priorities change, work changes, especially if you have a kid, you know what I'm talking about. The kid becomes a top priority for either one of them. And then it starts coming to a point where you start thinking that, okay, did I get married to the right person? The question was never, did I get married to the right person? The question was always that, what am I seeking out of my life? What am I seeking out of the partner that I am with, I'm in love with, that I'm married to? And what am I expecting, and how do I expect him or her to understand what my expectations are and live up to them? You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, on that point, I really want to stress on that point of expectations. Most of the disappointments coming from expectations and expectations coming just from these movies that people are watching. I suppose that relationships as a whole, like everything else, needs some kind of a North Star, right? Because we as humans, we learn by seeing others, people who have come before us build their lives. Now, for example, considering that most marriages before now, like in the past, most marriages were thriving on not the best factors, I would say, especially, marriages that stem from India, for example. The base in which they were rooted in wasn't really the greatest of places. Hence why some people find solace in finding their sense of marriage, their information about marriage from these movies. What would you recommend for people in general? I'm not limiting age groups, but people in general, where do you recommend these people get their education about marriages, relationships from? And what do you think that people can do to best deal with their previous conditioning of, we have this entire history of Indian tradition rooted in marriage, which as much as there are the good sides of Indian tradition, there are obviously a lot of obvious downsides.
Absolutely. So I'm going to say something that's going to be a very unpopular opinion, especially amongst the parents of the kids who want their kids to get married, is that give yourself that time. If you want to get married, while I do understand that, it's very difficult for you to stay away from marriage, and especially in the context of Indian society, people are nudged into getting married sooner than later. Having understood that, what's very important is you give each other that time before you get actually married. What does that mean? Understand your capabilities and compatibilities. And I mean not just in your minds, but in your physical bodies, in every single way that you can. See, at the end of the day, the real stuff is definitely different from whatever you say or do. And when you actually get into it, things will change. And I understand that. People change over a period of time. But the best bet that you can have for a good marriage is to actually give yourself enough time before you get married. Does that mean that we will have lesser marriages? Absolutely. It is going to happen that people will realize after a period of time that, okay, I'm in love with this person. I do adore this person, but I don't think I'm ready for a marriage commitment yet. Yes, there is that beautiful relationship that we have, but I'm not sure if that is equal to a marriage, basically. And that basically means that after a period of time, you may want to get out of the relationship. And that obviously means that there will be lesser marriages, which is anyways what's happening today. But let's take a more serious look at it, right? The problem is not about lesser marriages. The problem is having more compatible marriages. And for that, only thing that we can do is give each other that time. And I know that it might not sit well with the parents because they're like, okay, what do you mean give each other? Does that mean 2 years, 3 years? Well, I don't know. And that's where the conditioning will slowly start flowing away. If you're able to be with someone, if you're able to sustain with them over a period of time, then you'll realize that you've seen all the dark sides of it. In fact, I read this somewhere recently and I loved it absolutely. So they say that there are 2 times that you fall in love with a person. The first time that you fall in love with a person is when you fall in love with the beautiful things about that person. You adore them for the cute mannerisms. You adore them for all the beautiful things that they say or do. You adore them for how they take care of you. That's the first time you fall in love. But after a period of time, reality hits you. And you will see the negative side of the person as well, where you'll realize that whatever they do or say is not always good. Whatever they are is not the best for you. And you might not be okay with it. But despite all of those flaws, if you continue to be in love with them, that's when you call it the second love, which is obviously made to last a lot longer than the first love. And that's why I say give yourself the time. Maybe fall in love for the second time. Have fights. Understand what's wrong with each other. And then when you get into it, it's going to be a lot more easier, a lot more compatible. You realize that, okay, marriage is great as long as you're with the right person.
Yeah, I think this kind of synergizes with the earlier point you're making, which is like marriages over time, the impact of marriages or the connection kind of goes down unless you prioritize that second part of the love, the second time that you're falling in love with the person. I think people are so quick to assume that when the spark fades, the spark is like kind of gone forever. But I think that's where most people get misled, in the sense that just because the spark went doesn't mean that they can take active measures to actually bring that spark back, for example. Now, I realize that we're talking a lot about the proactive side, the reactive side of relationships, right? Of course, when the spark fades, it's sort of a reaction. We have to react to the spark fading, because if you just let the spark fade and not do anything about it, of course, the relationship would fade alongside it. But I want to take a step back and actually move on to the proactive side of it. Like, for example, let's just take a relationship or a marriage. We'll get to the distinction later. That is also one point that I really want to touch upon, which is the question that I just want to ask is, all these react like people who are in good marriages or good relationships, and the spark is there. What can they do proactively to, sustain their marriages, sustain their relationship, or make the spark, sustain over the long period of time?
All right. So I have a small theory here. Okay. It's called the Electron Theory. Now, why do I say it's called the Electron Theory? Is you are an electron on one side of your life, and then your spouse is electron on the other side of the side. Again, I'm not trying to generalize. I would say in many relationships or many marriages, what happens is the moment that these two electrons are brought together, they are kind of have to, in front of society, make to feel that they are bonded for life. And that from now on, as soon as they are bonded, everything else in their life revolves around this particular bond. For example, let's say you were here and your spouse was here. You had some other bonds with your friends, with your families, with your hobbies, with your work, with everything else. And your spouse had the same thing. Now, the moment you say that, hey, listen, these two are now bonded and everything has to revolve around this, everything else that was already existing kind of starts going into a nonsensical manner, and you don't know what the difference between each of these is. And suddenly there's a lot of intrusion, there's a lot of invasion of privacy is what I would say, as to what one spouse wants the other spouse to do. And that kind of creates a big friction between these spouses, because they are in that life where they remember that, oh, I had this time with my friends, I had this time with my family, I had this time with my hobbies, which I'm now missing, which are not a part of my life, which I don't like. I want them to be back. I want to appreciate all of that. And that's not happening because I'm now stuck in a bond. Now understand that it's not just these two people again. It goes back to the conditioning of the people that people around them are doing, that, hey, from now on, you go for a movie, you go together. From now on, you do this together. From now on, this is what happens. From now on, this is our family. From now on, and then this from now on goes on to ruin both of their peace. Now, what does this mean, Madhesh? Is basically the most important thing you need to understand, apart from, when you're getting married, is you are still two separate electrons. Like how everything else was there, marriage has now become a part of it, not the whole of it. Again, what I'm saying is you're still separate. If you do want to get married, remember that marriage becomes a part of it, not the whole of it. And when you realize this one simple thing, you will learn how to give the space to each other, even in a marriage, to make sure that the marriage becomes a part of it and doesn't change into the whole of it. And that space will eventually have you and help you realize that it's okay to live a life apart from each other, even when you're married. At the end of the day, marriage is a beautiful concept because you're trying to find a companion for life. Does that mean it'll always be like that? No. But you're trying. You're trying to see what most possible. You're trying to commit yourself. It's like any other relationship, except the commitment is slightly higher. But the problem is that there is a actual commitment and there is this perceptual commitment. What I mean by that is, actual commitment is what the spouses have with each other. The perceptual commitment is what the society has told they should have. And there's a big gap here. And as long as you stay at the actual commitment, hey, you know what? I love you. I want to be with you. I want to support you in all your decisions. That's great. But that translates into, from now on, whatever you do it together, and everything just gets messed up right there.
I think the individuality is missed amidst all the companionship. Yeah. And the point you were making about marriage is becoming a part of life, not the whole of it. Instantly, what that reminded me of is, like, of course, there are people who make marriages their entire life. But there are also the equal set of people who make work the entirety of their life, or fun the entirety of their life, for friends the entirety of their life. What do you think? How do you think these dynamics play into this role that, okay, all of these things are part of life, but not the whole? Like, where do you see work? Where do you see attachment styles, for example? That's a very popular topic in today's world. Where do you see star signs? Even that is a very, very, very popular, very, very popular topic in today's world. Where do you see all of those factors fitting in to this argument that you're making?
So I think, Madhesh, I'm gonna go off on a tangent here when I say this, right? And it's gonna be a little difficult, but stay with me when I say this, okay? Understand that when you realize that marriage is just a part of life, that means that you need to understand that you are still in other loops which are still interesting for you and were interesting for you before you got married. The problem was, again, if work was your entire life, so be it. No one is saying no to it. I'm one of those people who always believes that work-life balance, the whole theory of work-life balance is a load of BS. There is nothing called as work-life balance. There's only something called as balancing your energies. I mean, where are you putting your energies into, and what are you putting into your energies into? Now, what does that mean, Mahesh, is that if you, before even you got married or before even you got a relationship, your work was your whole life, and that continues to be your whole life, there's nothing wrong in it at all. That's a choice that you're making at that moment in your life. Well, that choice can lead to different consequences, but that's not what we're discussing. The point is, where are your priorities at? If there are other dimensions of your life which you like, for example, if you're someone who doesn't like to work that much, your play is very important to you, then you focus on your play. There's nothing wrong in it. But again, understand that there are different dimensions, and it's possible that you may concentrate on different things at different points in time. But where do you want to stick? And how do you want to bring marriage inside it? And how do you want to be that partner where you are going to compromise a little bit of time here and there so that you can give more time to your marriage, is where everything stays. So how do you decide your dynamics? How are you going to balance this marriage? Like what I said, as a part of your life is what the whole game. And if you're able to understand that, how do you balance marriage as a part of your life? You'll understand that everything else automatically happens beautifully. But the problem is that you don't want to nudge. You say work is all my life, and then you still want to get married. You're only creating a recipe for disaster. For either of the spouses, for that matter. But if you realize that, okay, work was important for me so far, now I want to see if I want to prioritize marriage, I want to see if I can prioritize this thing, then you start doing that consciously, and you'll see that beautiful things can come out of it. But be conscious of that effort that you take.
Yeah, so what was coming to mind, Sagar, as you were saying all of this is, of course, one of the main things that stood out for me was that people who are working a lot, working hard before their marriage, just because if the marriage just comes in and by default changes it, that the person's going to silently resent their spouse for not letting them do what they actually wanted to do. But then I think you brought in a point about priorities. Again, you didn't blatantly mention it, but the point about priorities in which if the person overworking, for example, realizes it themselves and they make like the priority shift to prioritize the marriage differently, that is, even though it's the same outcome, but it's coming from an entirely different place, or it's coming from the individual rather than what is expected from the individual. Now, I want to absolutely love the flow that what we are going here, but again, I want to take a step back because I feel like we're using the same terms. We're using the same terms over and over again, but then something that you said earlier on caught my eye in that they don't mean the same thing. So relationships and marriages. You said a few minutes ago that you may love a person, that you may love them enough to be in a relationship with them, but then you may not be sure if you want to marry that person yet. What do you think is like the gap between a relationship, like someone who you're in a relationship with or someone you're in love with, versus someone you're like ready to get married to? Where does that leap lie?
Right. I'll tell you what. Again, this is going to be, it's going to sound very controversial. I'm just going to say it, okay? Marriages are like life insurance. Okay. I'll tell you what I mean by that.
Okay.
Right? So when do you buy life insurance? Tell me. When do you buy life insurance? I mean, I don't know if you ever bought life insurance, but
I've never.
Then I'm going to have to explain life insurance to you now, okay? I have a life insurance on me, okay? Here's what life insurance is. I pay a yearly sum to an insurance company. And I have told them that I'm going to pay the sum to you for the next 25 years. But if anything happens to me in these 25 years, then you give me a lump sum amount of money to my family. That's called a life insurance. Now, at the end of the 25 years, if nothing happens to me, I'm still alive. What does that mean? The money doesn't come to me. It's gone, right? But if I die, someone gets that money. Now, what's happening here? I'm basically paying someone money in the hope that if something goes wrong with me, someone else will be compensated for that. Now, why do I say marriage is like life insurance? Is basically you're investing your time and energy into a partner, hoping after 25 years, and when things go wrong for you, he or she will be there for you. I know this sounds very, very rudimentary, very logical for that matter. They go, Sagar, so what? Love doesn't matter. See, love matters. And of course, you want to be with that person. That's why you're in that relationship in the first place. I'm not saying that. But marriage is a place where you're literally signing a contract where you're saying, hey, I want to see if we can grow old together. And when something goes wrong with me, or if something goes wrong with you, I'm going to be there by your side in your pains, in your happiness. And that's the most important and the most secret thing about a marriage is you're basically making a commitment towards each other. Hey, I want to be there for you when and if things go wrong, either for you or for me. And this is a relationship that I want to be in. Now, that basically means that you're investing in the hope that tomorrow when things go wrong, that someone will be there for you. And what else is this if it's not just an investment in the hope that someone will be there for you? Because, well, you all know, all of us know that things can go wrong very quick, very fast, especially in today's world. In 2 years, perspective changes, and then suddenly you don't want to be in a relationship with that person. In 3 years, maybe you find someone even more beautiful and you feel like, oh, I don't want to, I made a mistake by marrying this person. I want to be with that person. And again, please, nothing is right or wrong here. I'm just trying to say that you are getting married because you're scared of being lonely in the future. Because love stays, understand, love always stays. Love is beautiful in the relationship as well. But marriage becomes a commitment. And that's when the relationship, that's why I'm saying that you have to give it some time before you get married, because when you have given enough time to understand that even if things do go wrong, will he or she be by my side? Or will I have the courage to be by his or her side? And that basically means that when things go wrong, you will be there by their side. And that's when marriage becomes so essential, because you're trying to commit to something that, hey, I know that I'm not perfect. I know you're not perfect. But somewhere we are able to be there with each other. And I think in times of despair, we can be there for each other. It's like a friend for life, is what I always believe. But again, the notion, the conditioning makes it a lot different than what it is. And understand that in earlier, again, I'm not trying to generalize anything here, but in earlier, I'm talking about 30, 40 years back, marriages were different. They were more about a community, more about building the whole community. That's why people were very clear that they wanted to marry within the same community, because they believed that as and when the marriage happened within the community grew in itself. Intercaste marriages were looked down upon. Yes, it was bad, but there was also a good side to it, that the community in itself was growing. You see what I'm saying? And the intention was marriage was not just marriage of putting two people together, but also to see how the community itself can grow. But today, that's not the case. Marriages have become a simple conditioning and the societal conditioning that people want you to do. And that's why it's so important, more important, that you marry only when you're sure, that you marry only when there's enough time that you've given to each other. When you marry, that you know that, okay, I want to see what more is possible with this human being. Again, I believe marriage is just a name. The relationship is growing. But because we give that name of marriage, we have in our heads a condition that, okay, a marriage is supposed to last forever. Whereas all of us know, if you take data, I mean, I don't know the exact numbers, but I'm sure that at least 30 to 40% of marriages end up in divorce in today's world.
Nowadays. Yeah.
So when the fact is very clear that you are not going to be with each other, at least 3 out of 10 couples. But all of us, when you get married, like, no, my marriage is going to last forever. Whoever says that, no, I think I'm going to this 3 of the 10. Well, that's the optimism of life. I'm not denying that. But what's the point? Where are you heading? And are you getting married because you want to get married? Or are you getting married because you really want to get married? That's all.
And on that point about how people can actually evolve beyond relationships and marriages, I think you beautifully touched on and said that, okay, there has to be a point where you're sure of the other person. Are there any specific things that the person has to understand? Like, for example, if I'm talking to someone, or if I'm definitely not thinking of marrying anytime soon, 21 years old. But if at all I am, starting to think along those lines, what would you say is that one thing that I would have to prioritize? If there's no one thing, let me know that also. But what do I have to prioritize in the other person? What do I have to understand in them to ensure that I know what I'm getting into more than anything else?
So I have what I call as a 3-point formula for anyone to find a partner. Okay. The first point is what I call is see if your core values match with each other. What I mean by that is, again, when I say core, it also today especially depends on how your working styles are, on how your time management styles are, and what is important to you in your life. Like, for example, give you a very random example. I'm a person who values time a lot. I would never be okay with having a partner who disregards the concept of time, who's like, okay, we'll do it whenever. Something that won't work with me. Because I know that I'm not saying that I have to have everything in the right place in the right moment. No. But then I know that time and the value of time is very important. And my commitment is very important to me. So if there's someone on the other side who's not very particular about commitment and saying that, hey, you know what, Sagar, when I say 4, it is 4:30 or 5, then that's something that I cannot work with. The same way, different people have different cores with regards to their money. For example, someone who says that, you know what, money is very important to me. I've seen hardships all my life, so I'm not going to be able to let anyone spend money as easily as I would. If they end up marrying a spendthrift, that's going to be chaos. Again, how deep those codes are and how much they value them is very important. So if you value something a lot, and if something is a very, very, very important thing to you, then it's important that you make sure that those things are matching. Because if they're not, then today or tomorrow, you will end up in a lot of chaos. And understand that these codes are very few. For example, me, time, definitely yes. Everything else can be okay. I mean, everything else can be compromisable, but this, definitely not. And people at least have one or two of these very core values that they are very, very important with. So if they are not able to compatibly match both these, then it's going to be a disaster. Number one. Number two, you find beautiful compromisable differences. Now, what do I mean by compromisable differences, Madhish? I basically say that to keep up the spice in life, you need to have some things that are different from your spouse. And these are what I call as compromisable differences. Why do I say compromisable differences? Because, well, of course, you can't compromise on your values, but there are some things you can compromise on. For example, let's say that, okay, I'm going to take my own example with Devangi, right? So I was not a big person who used to dance, right? But Devangi used to love dance. For me, dance was okay, you can do it if you are okay. And I was never a good dancer, still not a good dancer. And yet,
I would disagree.
when I'm with Devangi, what happens is that I somehow like to enjoy my dance with her. And she's one of those people who has introduced me to dance as a concept, and I enjoy that part of my life now, right? And now let's take food. I've always been a foodie. I like to try different cuisines in life. And Devangi was someone who was like, okay, I'm okay with anything. I'm okay with eating normal food. I'm okay with eating at home every day. That kind of person. But after we got married, because of the way that I was, we ended up going to a lot of different places to eat our food, and somehow she started enjoying it. And now she's a matter of place and hey, why can't we go to this place and this place? And that's become a part of our life. And we enjoy that. And again, both of us have a few different tastes here and there. But again, we try to explore that and we kind of push each other and like, oh, can we try this today? Can we try this today? Doesn't always work out, but it's fun to have that kind of relationship where you are at least trying to expand your boundaries, where you're at least trying to see what more you would like to do, right? And this is what I call as the compromisable differences, where you have these subtle differences which keep up the spice in life. And these are very, very important, by the way. Otherwise, let's say that X person is exactly the same as Y person. Like everything is same. The food taste is same, this is same, everything is same. Within a couple of years, you'll get bored of each other. And then now what do I do? Because and then life seems like, okay, and I mean, you're already anticipating the other person's next move, and then what do you do? So you need both. You need both. You need that core values to match, and you need the subtle differences that you can compromise on so they can keep the spice in life. And the third and the most important thing, which again is very, very important in terms of the context of Indian society when I say this, is that where are you going to be living and who are you going to be living with, right? Because if you're deciding to move into someone's house, either the spouse, I mean, we're moved quite a lot ahead. So if you're a spouse who decides that I'm going to move into the other spouse's house, then you're going to be able to understand that there are going to be a lot of differences between the way you lived and the way they lived. So how are you going to be managing that? Okay, let's say you decide to live alone with each other. Then the topics about who's going to take care of the food, who's going to cook the food, who's going to do all the chores, who's going to do what. At least an understanding. I'm not saying it has to be written on pen and paper or a contract and signed, but I'm saying at least an understanding of what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Because again, this is one of the points that I feel people lose out on, because they feel that, okay, we'll figure it out. And by the time you actually have to do those things, you're like, okay, I didn't expect you to do this. I didn't expect that I would be doing this. I didn't expect that, oh, you won't do this. And then this is a conversation that's never ending. And then it can go on to create a lot of chaos. Yeah, it's important to have a discussion that. So these are three things that you have to report. First is the core. Okay, are your core values matching, the core principles matching? Second is the compromisable differences which you are okay with, kind of adjusting with each other, because that keeps the spice of life open. And the third is how are you going to live and why you're going to live and who are you going to live with, and who is going to be doing what. Because we'll understand that there are a lot of things that you cannot run away from. Laundry you can't run away from, food you can't run away from. These are all basic things that you have to do when you're living with each other, especially. So who's going to do what? Again, they can change over a period of time. I'm not saying no, but at least have we talked about it? Do you want, especially today, do you want to have kids or not? Very important question that sometimes we don't ask. How are your finances going to be like? Okay, are we going to make sure that we keep a safety fund somewhere? Are we going to make sure that, okay, both of us earn? Are we going to make sure that, okay, one of us doesn't earn, one of us earns? What are these things that we have not talked about yet? So that's important to talk about.
Yeah, I think you touched on a point that which I was eventually going to come to anyway, which is like raising children and when do you want to have kids, all of that. And I love to, before I go there, I just wanted to, sum up how effectively you just outline those 3 steps, which is the first of the core values, things that you have to align on. And if I think people get their core values not matching, they get confused with polarity. They're like, okay, our values don't match, but it's like we are polar opposite to each other. That doesn't work. Like you said, you kind of, that was, as you were explaining that point, that was what was coming to my mind, was just like, of course, core values have to match, but there's a sense that polarity is also important, which you kind of touched on with the second point. It's like polarity is important, but not with values, but with your interests. Values and interests are like 2 different things. And I think you kind of summed up the entire thing by saying that, okay, the third one is just to be honest, have honest conversations and have honest conversations about roles. I think people nowadays have just hate that word of roles, especially because they assume that roles are rigid. When in reality, they don't have to be. It's just that, okay, in the past, it used to be rigid. This person cooks, this person goes to work, this person cleans the house, this person do whatever, insert whatever you want. I think that's where people get their hate for the word roles. But what they miss in the process, they actually just completely miss the value of roles in and of itself, why it's there in the first place. So thank you so much for that, the summary. I think it made sense for me personally. But coming to the kids' point, right? Everything you just described is great for someone who's about to get married, right? Who can like just look at everything you've said and they're like, okay, fine, I have all of these check boxes to kind of check off. But what would you say to someone who's already in a marriage, who did not do any of these things? How do you think that they can like proceed forward?
It's a very interesting question, and I have a very, very strong thought on this. If you're already married and you're not sure where you're headed, maybe you're about to take an important step in your life where you're planning a kid for yourself, or maybe you're just in a place where you're trying to figure out a few more things of your life. The first and the most important thing, and I cannot stress on this enough, is please first respect each other. Now, why do I use the word respect here? Is because, okay, you got married. Okay, it might have been an hasty decision. It may have been an impulse decision. It may have been a decision that you made out of love. But if at the moment when you're reevaluating what has to happen and how you're going to go ahead, please have utmost respect for each other. Now, why do I use the word respect? Is because if you don't have respect, you can't have a conversation. If you don't have respect for what the other person wants or says or does, you're not going to be able to talk honestly and transparently. If you don't have respect just for the fact that people also change, and please, this is the most important thing, is that if you are already 5 years on the line, 10 years on the line in your marriage, it's possible that you've changed. It's possible that your spouse has changed. Can you respect that first? Then have a conversation. Then ask yourself, okay, what is it we want? And understand that in that conversation, even if it comes to a point there where you realize that, okay, maybe we need not have to have married each other, or maybe we made a mistake when we got married to each other, that's still okay. But if the conversation starts without respect, it immediately goes to the point where people say that you said this before marriage and then you're not doing this. I thought this is how you're going to be, and this is what my notion of marriage was, this is what my notion of love was, and all that is missing. And how do I live with it when all this is not there? I understand things have changed, but are you going to be at least in the space where you can be respectful of each other's words and what they want? And when you start the conversation from respect, it's possible that you may, like I said, you may even decide to split apart or move away from each other, but you will still be there to support each other because, well, the love was there, right? It's not the love went. And love is a very beautiful thing. You have it with one person, and that doesn't mean it'll go away in a period of time. Love stays, but it's just that we forget to respect that love, and that's what creates the biggest issue. So if you are someone who is in a difficult relationship right now, especially in your marriage, and you've married and you're in a space where you're trying to understand each other more, first, learn to respect each other. Second step is to try to remove the conditionings of marriage. For example, very simple example, let's say that you choose to live in a marriage and you want to be with each other, but you feel that, you know what, I think it'll be great if we can just sleep in 2 separate bedrooms. One of the couples that I know, a good friend of mine, they sleep in 2 separate bedrooms. It's not that they still live together, but they live in 2 separate bedrooms simply because one spouse wants the AC in full volume, full completely chilled, and the other one doesn't like AC. Does that mean they stop living with each other? No, they still love each other. They want But imagine this conversation without respect. And you immediately think that, okay, who doesn't sleep with the AC on? Or like, listen, I feel cold. How can I understand that? And there's always going to be fight. But if you start the conversation with respect, that hey, I know that you have this condition where you're not able to sleep without AC. Maybe you're not comfortable with that. Maybe your body is in such a way, but I'm not built that way. Can we see if we can still live with each other and maybe find another way out of it? Still okay. So having a difficult conversation can be two ways. It can be done with respect and without respect. The more respect you have, the more beautiful the outcome of that discussion is going to be. The talk is going to be, and I think it's going to be an overall growth for you in your life as well. You will realize that, okay, maybe we're just not in the same place we were when we got married, and that's okay.
I think many people perceive the end of marriages as their end of life. And I think most problems arise from the fear of the marriage ending rather than the marriage actually ending. I feel like most people just drive themselves to the extremes, less because of the actual consequences of the marriage failing, but more because they are like in their head thinking, okay, what if they say this? What if they do this? What if? And I know this is like a very popular topic that you touch on in your workshop, for example, this entire what if trend, the what if cycle that people kind of go on. And so that kind of gelled a lot of things together in this conversation. I want to capture your attention and, reroute that back to the having a child discussion. Of course, someone who's already married can start by having these conversations. I think what you just said was they can have the same thing that you recommended for the people who have not done it, who have not been married yet, which is the core values, and then the interests aligning, like having polar interests, and then just being open about conversations. I think the people who are also already married just need to do that, but with more respect. Just need to reevaluate the situation on those three fronts, but with more respect. How does having a child, or how does raising a child enter this conversation? I think we can tackle this question also in like two different fronts. One, people who've not had children yet. Two, people who already have children, who have already raised them to a certain point, but they want to reevaluate how they're going about the entire thing.
I'm going to start off by talking about people who do have children. It's very important here, especially for the child's growth also. And again, I'm not a parenting coach. I don't know how to raise child. I have children. I mean, I do have a child of my own. He's 7 years old. I'm not saying that I don't know how to treat a child. I'm just saying that here's my perspective that's very, very important. I'm just going to touch base on it, is that the most important thing you need to do when you have a child is you need to let one parenting style be dominant. And what does that mean is that both of you are built different ways. You have a different parenting strategy. Your spouse may have a different parenting strategy. And while it's good to have two strategies working together so that the nurturing of the child is great, there should always be at least one dominant parenting strategy. And understand why this is so important is because if we don't have one dominant parenting strategy, it's going to have the child confused. It's always going to think that, okay, mom allows this, dad doesn't. Or dad allows this, but mom doesn't. So when I want this, I'm going to go to dad. And when I want this, I'm going to go to mom. And it's going to be like confusing to the child. Okay, I don't know who to ask what. And they're like, okay, I'm not sure about what is right or what is wrong. So there has to be one simple, clear parenting strategy that is higher. The other one can be like a nurturing strategy, but then that strategy has to be approved of by both the parents. So if you already have a child, please discuss with each other as to what kind of parenting strategy that you want to go with, and try to stick to that. Again, having a child is like a completely volatile world in itself, right? How much of you think if you plan something, it will go in a different direction, and yet all you can do is try. So find that parenting strategy that you feel that you want your child to have, and then start working on it and see what's possible. That's for people who already have children. For people who are about to have a child, I'm going to give you a very fair. And again, please don't think that I'm trying to deter you. I'm just trying to give you the hard truth, is that having a child magnanimously changes the dynamics of your relationship with your spouse, simply because there is a third energy in the room, and suddenly there's a lot of energy being diverted to that child for the right reasons, for the right matter, you know what I'm saying. But that only means that the dynamics of your relationship is going to change massively. And how much ever you say you're going to be ready for it, you are not, is something I can say. Like everything else in life, talking about something and experiencing something is always different. So while what I'm saying is that please be ready for what's going to change, learn to embrace that change, and at the same time have a very healthy discussion as to who is going to be parenting the child. who's going to be the major parent, who's going to be spending and devoting more time towards them, and how your work is going to revolve around. Because understand, especially for parents who are working, both of them are working, it's going to be more and more difficult to manage your time. You're going to have a compromise on a lot of things. So who's going to be the dominant parent? Who's going to be able to, who's going to position to at least give or devote more time? Again, it can change, it will change. It's a very natural thing to happen. But then at least have a discussion. And remember, like everything else, the child also is a part of your life. It's not your whole life. I can't say this enough. The moment either of the spouses make the child their whole life, the dynamic of the relationship can become bad to worse to worst. Because then suddenly your focus is only on the child, and then the marriage takes a backseat. Like everything else happened when marriage became a very important part of your life, and everything else took a backseat. So understand that the child also is a nurturing, and I understand it's not easy, and the child needs more attention. But then even the child is just another part of your life. Try to make it that way, so that the child also learns to grow more independently than you would want it, and then the relationship grows naturally and beautifully. Is what I'm saying.
A theme that is recurring to me as you're talking about this is how whenever one factor becomes a central focus of your life, there is that inherent chaos that gets created also. But then where I feel like a gap is, and you can definitely answer this, is where I feel like a gap lies in that is that inherently signals a degree of balance. A balance is important in all of these things. But then when people talk about work-life balance, for example, what is the gap that they miss in the balance that you are talking about, for example? Because you don't approve of the concept of work-life balances. So what is the gap between the two concepts?
The gap is very simple, Madesh. You're just not present to the point that you're. The gap is that when you're at work, you're thinking about home. When you're at home, you're thinking about work. If you're simply able to be in the place that you are in, there is no gap, because you're present for what's happening in that moment. When you're a parent, you're the best parent that you could be in that moment. Understand? I'm not saying best parent ever. I'm saying when you're a parent, you're the best parent you could be in that moment. When you're an employee, you are the best employee in that moment. When you're a CEO, you're the best CEO in that moment. When you're a spouse, you're the best spouse in that moment. And that moment is the most important thing here. The problem is you don't stay in the moment. The problem is when you're in your work, deep in your work, something goes wrong at your home, and you're suddenly like, what kind of a parent am I? I'm not able to be with my child. It's so sad. Okay, you're not. You can't change the reality. You've chosen to be at this moment in your office. Focus on the office. The moment you've left work and you come back home and you're with your child, and you're like, oh shit, I forgot to give this report. I mean, the boss is going to call me now and he's going to shout and this is going to happen, that's going to happen. And you're constantly thinking about that and you're not focusing on the child then. How does the child feel? There's a gap. Same thing with the spouse. When you're with the spouse, sitting on your phone constantly, you're trying to watch Instagram, you're trying to chat with someone else, you're not even having a heart-to-heart conversation with your spouse. There's a gap. So the gap is not with your time. The gap is not in the work-life balance. The gap is in where you are and how you're committing yourself at that moment. And if you're able to commit yourself to that moment, work-life balance will no longer matter, because you'll still at least be there when you have to be there. That's all.
I think in the best case, that's all we can do also, right, in our lives. Like just be where we are as well as we can be right there. We can't be in like 10,000 different places all at once, although I know you're a person who would definitely like to do that.
Apparently not. I've learned it the hard way, Madesh, that I say that, oh, I want to do this also, I want to do this. I've realized that I don't want to do it. I have come to the harsh realization that I don't want to do it all. It's not an easy thing to gulp down your throat, because you realize that you're still you're still human. And how much ever you wish to become a superhuman, you cannot be. So, well, again, that is acceptance, Madesh, that I cannot be at 10,000 places at once. And that means that some things are going to be missing out, and that's okay. And I'm going to have to learn. The more you're going to feel that, okay, I cannot be there, I'm not able to be there, is the more you.
Yeah. For anyone who's watching, for anyone who's listening, most of the concepts that Sagar is actually sharing to me right now are also the same concepts he talks about day in and day out inside the Being You community. The entire concept of having priorities, of accepting things. This work-life balance, for example, all of these concepts are some things that he shares in his Being You community.
In fact, that's what I was going to say, is that, like when I was saying, give your marriage your time, it's also important to enroll yourself in courses like this where you're able to unheal. I mean, rather heal yourself. You rather open up about what's gone wrong within you before you commit yourself. So being you is it's a beautiful space. In fact, Pranati has always been an advocate for the, you know what, Sagar, people who are about to get married should come to being you first. Because that's when they'll realize that, oh, they've been conditioned so much. They have to take the conditioning out, then get married. It's so much more easier and smoother.
Yeah. I can definitely see, I can hear Pranoti saying that. And for anyone who's watching, this is how closely knit our community also is. So, most of the link will be in the description of this. This is planning on going on YouTube. This is planning on going on YouTube. So you will find more details about this in the description. But for this time that we have with Sagar, of course, it has been a very long, thoughtful, purposeful conversation. I would just like to end with like the cherry on top. Sagar, how has becoming a father changed you as a person? How has it been the last few years? I know Arav, your son, he's like 7 years old. How has it been? Life before becoming a dad and, now that after becoming.
I think one thing that is really important is what I would say is that I've become more aware of what I do as a person. Because I know that my son is watching me. If whenever I'm around him, he is constantly watching. And I've understood that my behaviors can create a lot of understanding of his perceptions of his life. So I've become very conscious and more aware of who I am as a person, so that I don't. Again, I'm not saying that I cannot impact him negatively. I will naturally. That is a part of what I am and who I am. But then I'm becoming more aware of who I want to be, so that he can find the right things from me. And I want him to be his own person. But I know until he grows up, he is gonna have to take a lot from me. So I'm just trying to be more and more aware of what I do and who I am as a person, so that he can take the best that he can from me. And that is, I feel, one of the biggest change that has happened to me after I become the father. Me as a spouse has changed a lot after I become a father, but well, that's for some other time.
That's for some other time indeed. I think for people listening, they might think that this is also such a small thing. Okay, it made you more aware, but my God, it's like one of Sagar's biggest qualities is awareness. How quickly he catches his own patterns is what continuously, for example, makes him stand out as opposed to other coaches and other trainers who kind of in the same pace doing the same things he does. So, Sagar, thank you so much. Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time. This has been like a heartful conversation on relationships, on marriages, how people can better navigate their marriages and relationships. In case if you're watching this, if you have any doubts or questions or anything that Sagar would like to, that you would want an answer from, you have two options really. One is leave a comment, and Sagar is the kind of person who's constantly checking social media to see how in what ways he can provide value. Or secondly, it's the easiest way to get in touch with Sagar is it's his LinkedIn profile. That's one of the places where he's most active. He posts every day about like 4 or 5 times a week. So whenever you have any questions, whenever you have anything to share with Sagar, even if you want his attention, his perspective on anything, feel free to reach out to him on LinkedIn. He's very active on LinkedIn. So I'm very confident that he will get back to you in no time. So for you, Sagar, thank you so much for your time. And for the person watching, thank you so much for your attention. It's the attention economy. We value your attention more than anything. And I hope through this conversation, there's at least one thing that you took away to like change or, implement in your own life, in your own marriages and your own. Yeah. Thank you so much for watching.
It was wonderful. And to all the listeners out there, I just want to say one last thing. Live, laugh, love, inspire, and be you. That's all.
That's all indeed, Sagar. You and your conclusions are literally the best. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and we'll catch you the next time with another topic as exciting as this.